Welcome to the CPO Rising podcast series brought to you by Products That Count, the world's largest nonprofit community, engaging over 500,000 product managers and chief product officers united by a mission to empower everyone to build products that truly count. In a world flooded with products, only a few ignite passion, deliver value at scale, and transform lives. Behind those exceptional products are visionary CPOs and high-performing product teams. We recognize these trailblazers through our coveted awards, accelerate careers from PM to the C-suite and beyond through daily best practices, and serve as the trusted advisor to nearly all Fortune 1000 CPOs. Our corporate alliance includes Walmart, Ford, Cisco, Johnson & Johnson, Amplitude, and more. The most admired product leaders across industries serve on our advisory council, guiding the future of product leadership. Together, we're shaping a future where every product counts. Learn more at productsthatcount.org. Produced in partnership with Capgemini and Mighty Capital, this series brings you exclusive conversations between our resident CPO, Renee Niemi, and the 2025 CPO Award winners. Get ready for raw insights, real strategies, and the secrets behind their success. Let's get into it.
Well, good afternoon. Today I have with me Sahir Azam. He is the Chief Product Officer of MongoDB. Sahir, it's so wonderful to have you. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I guess I'd like to just start by saying congratulations on being one of the top CPOs in 2025.
Thanks, Renee. Great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dive in, I would love for you to introduce yourself. 2 minutes or less. Tell us a little bit about you, your company, your current role, and maybe a tad about your journey on, how you got here.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm the Chief Product Officer at MongoDB. For those of you who may not have heard of MongoDB, we are a very popular modern database company. So we help power many of the applications that we all interact with, whether it be in our mobile phones or business applications in our professional context. Many of behind the scenes are powered by our database technology. The company was founded almost 15 years ago at this point as an open source technology and really drove a lot of virality in the developer community because it was sort of a fresh way of thinking about building applications and a new style of database. Today, we're a roughly $2 billion public company. We've transitioned our product or expanded our technology journey from open source and enterprise commercial software to becoming a leader in cloud data services. So I helped drive that transition, and that's what I originally was brought into the company for. These days, I cover all of our product portfolio, spend a lot of time on strategy as well as some of the business transformation we're going through.
Wow, that's amazing. What were you doing prior to being at Mongo?
Yeah, my career started actually in the field. So I was a pre-sales engineer, was kind of my first software, kind of enterprise software role. And I really loved the idea of being in the middle of business and technology and being able to translate those two things. And I remember I had a mentor way back then in the beginning of my career who was like, I could tell you don't necessarily want to be a CTO type and run engineering someday, nor do you necessarily see yourself as a CRO someday on the pure business side. And you're kind of trying to find your way. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you're really great at the intersection of both those things. And you should lean into that skill and maybe think someday about moving into product, which is in many ways kind of the best, most strategic expression of that skill set or talent. And so that was at the very early part of my career. Over the years, I bounced between earlier stage companies that had gone public or gotten acquired multiple times. So I also had the ability to kind of see small hypergrowth companies as well as larger, broader portfolio companies. And that was really kind of formative. And I'd say the first half of my career was really outbound. It was pre-sales engineering. It was being running ultimately field technical teams. I spent a few years in sales. And then eventually I had the opportunity when VMware acquired a startup I was at to move to the Bay Area and use that as a way to transition into more of the factory side of a technology company and learning how to build and ship product. And I was at a SaaS analytics company called Sumo Logic. I was, running platform product management, spending a lot of time on repositioning the company there. And MongoDB, I certainly was aware of, and I built conviction that large scale open source companies of the future would need to be cloud companies, not necessarily just traditional open source or open core companies. And so when they came knocking, looking for somebody to kind of lead the transition and launch of the company's business model towards a consumption based cloud service, I felt like that would be a huge opportunity. Now, and in hindsight, 9 years ago, there's no way I could have predicted the level of scale and success we've been fortunate to have at MongoDB. But that's a little bit of my background and how I landed at Mongo.
That's a really wonderful story. I also noticed that you dabble a lot in startups. I want to probe that a little bit more later, but I have to imagine that that must fuel your energy for tech. I love the fact that you have a background in customer facing background, and I really do notice that product leaders that have spent some time in the field just have such a broader, deeper empathy for customer problem solving. So I love that about your background. You've been in product leadership for years, and it would be wonderful if you could, this role changes. Well, first of all, it's a pretty new role, but it's just been morphing, especially over the last 10 years. Tell us a little bit about what you've noticed from when you kind of started in product leadership to now.
Yeah, I think maybe a few points. I think a lot of what I would consider historical product thinking was either very much leaning inbound and viewing sort of engineering counterparts as the primary sort of constituent, so to speak, in terms of a partner. And so I've always felt like engineering is and having a great relationship with my engineering peers and all the way down the organization is job one. But I view it very much as the role is really needing to be a 360-degree function that keeps every aspect of the organization kind of strategically aligned. Because if you're shipping product that doesn't match the distribution strategy of the company, you won't be successful. So I really spend a lot of time personally on thinking about the connection between the different functions and making sure there's uh, things are coherent across everything from the pricing model to the financials to the distribution and sales models. I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later, to obviously how the technology and product is actually built to match that. And those things have to intersect. And I feel like historically, I would feel like there was less of that sort of thinking in product management, but I feel like it's pretty important. And we have this term 360-degree product managers to sort of affect that internally at MongoDB. That's kind of, I think, the main piece. The second is I think that there are many product management roles that are really, in my mind, more project management versus product management.
Oh,
And in the absence of project management being appropriately funded, which is a great, important function and skill set, program management, project management, then ends up happening is you take a product person out of the strategy and customer. And I found that it's very hard to find somebody who has the skill set and the time to do both well. And
yeah.
so I lean way more towards a strategic, market facing, customer centric, domain sort of specific product skill set. But you have to counterpart that by taking the responsibility of managing the execution and the project and all of that off their plate. That's the second sort of key thing I think we've seen an evolution, I think, in the industry, but I firmly believe that's how to structure a healthy R&D organization and make it effective. And I think the last is more around kind of some personal values that I think are really important to succeed as a product leader. One is just resilience. Product by definition is through influence. There's it's not a role with a direct authority. We don't manage the execution of go to market or engineering. And so doesn't mean everything's always going to go your way. So having resilience and grit is really important, I think, to navigate just how challenging and ambiguous the job can be at times. And then the other is adaptability. And, especially as in a fast growing environment, a growth company, the job's different every 2 years. And so if you're not fundamentally adaptable to be able to grow on any aspect, whether it be leadership and management or business strategy or financial acumen or whatever it might be, there's constantly a new set of skills to be learned to evolve as a company grows. And so I would say that combination of resilience and adaptability are the sort of values that characteristics I try to instill and hire for in the team.
Yeah, that indirect responsibility really puts a burden on product leaders to lead with influence as opposed to authority, and with influence comes authority, but it's just really incumbent on us to have a strong vision and be those leaders that people follow. I especially resonate with that 360 view and the change from almost project management, which is really what I saw a lot of in my early career
Mm.
as a CPO, to much more of a business leader because you're literally almost the conductor of all the things that need to happen to make a product successful. So I really resonate with that. And I thought I was the only one who used that 360 view, so,
Nice.
I'll let you trademark it if you let me use it for free. How's that?
No, no, no. It's about giving back. We want everyone using that technology.
Awesome, I love that. I am, speaking of beliefs, yeah, I don't think I'm alone when I say a company culture plays such a big role in product teams' ability to execute successfully. And, you know, some might say product-centered cultures are the best for product leaders, but honestly, I think product can be successful in any culture. And I would love to just get your perspective, specifically MongoDB. Like, where do you think the culture is centered? And examples other than product might be finance centered, where you kind of start with the budget and work outwards, or sales center, where you're really trying to maximize revenue. Like, where do you land, and how does that affect your daily prioritization and process?
Yeah, I think that it's unhealthy if a company has such a strong center in one type of a culture or one part of the organization, because I believe I think I used the word coherent earlier. That's kind of all those things have to line up. Now, at MongoDB, I'm, very proud to be part of an organization that has a very strong engineering culture because we're a deep technology sort of company. Databases are hard to build and we need really
Yeah.
amazing development talent to pull that off. So we certainly have that in as a core of the organization. We're very much a product company. But yet on the go-to-market side, I spend probably most of my peer time with our president and who runs all of our field and revenue driving functions, because especially at our scale, distribution really matters, and architecting that properly, evolving that from a technology sell to expand to meet different customers in different ways through things like solution selling or product led growth is critically important. And so you could argue we're very much a go to market oriented culture as well, because we spend a lot of time and intentionality thinking through that sort of system and that architecture. I'd say as a product leader, I want to feel perfectly comfortable in both aspects of that. So whether it's a deep conversation within our CTO and the teams around sort of what the next generation of the platform, the architecture looks like, or whether it's a conversation with our CMO or CRO around how to drive new product adoption or different revenue drivers. I don't view that as at odds with each other, and I kind of lean into making sure that my team is fluid across both of those sort of axes of the company. And I think at MongoDB we really have a strong culture of I would say intellectual honesty around the idea. And so, it's always encouraged that if somebody has challenging an idea or sees an opportunity that we may be missing, we don't try to like box them into their particular lane. And that's certainly a expectation I uphold of the product team, is to think about things for everything from how sales compensation might affect adoption of one of their capabilities or features or products, all the way through obviously having a voice on some of the technology choices we're making, and not having such fixed lines, whether that be culturally or implicitly in the organization.
Yeah, it's interesting, that that, uh, It's a very unique view, and I love the fact that it's a unique view. I think a lot of what I've heard is that, even though you may be centered in one function or another, it's not to the exclusion of the others. Given kind of your thoughts on the culture, talk to me a little bit about um, prioritization. Like, how are priorities set, and how are they disrupted?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we have I don't think it's a particularly novel thing, but we have a set of sort of annual strategy conversations where we took a long view around the core beliefs about what we believe about our market and our position and sort of where things are going. And then that informs sort of a set of core objectives that we think we need to execute on, both in some of which are just annual, others that stretch multi-year. And we as an executive team, with input from the other leadership in the companies, start to form sort of an annual planning process, which is about our core objectives, which then leads into sort of how we financially plan around that. That set of core objectives combined with kind of a stack rank and hierarchy of very measurable SMART goals around how we, drive success against those objectives and know if we're tracking well, then gets cascaded to the organization. And then we leave it to the leaders to determine how they set sub team goals and all that to ladder up to that piece. It takes a lot of work. It's always a little bit messy. It's not a perfect science, but
Yeah.
at a kind of high structural level, what that allows is prioritization to be pushed down in the organization. So it's not just myself, or if it's a product prioritization decision, or the senior leaders. At our scale, we really need the people closer to the work making the decisions of what's important to hit the objectives at any given level. And then we leverage sort of this idea of a directly responsible individual to have a single accountable individual that we know to go to as an executive team to keep things on track, to escalate when things need attention, more resources, or just a flag that, hey, we got this wrong. We either need to deprioritize this, or, we're way off track. Those conversations always have to happen. So we want an inspection mechanism at the organization to make sure we're tracking against those top level priorities. And
Yeah.
so that's taken years to evolve, and it's constantly evolving just to meet the scale of the organization. We're roughly, 6,000 people today, but I can remember only a few years ago we were in the high hundreds or low thousands. And so we've had to create these mechanisms and systems to delegate and push more decision making faster in the down the organization versus having it be only at the most senior levels.
Yeah. I think this is just a testament of the power of being convicted around and taking the
Yeah.
time as a leadership team of really agreeing on the big rocks, if you will,
Yeah. Yep.
the what you're trying to move, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that pushing decisions like prioritization down in the organization is best in class. I really think, because you can move faster, you get higher quality people wanting to work in your organization. So it's really awesome to
Yeah.
hear how that works.
Yeah, I'd say, there's always an exception, where there's some context I have or something I strategically just see as important. And, I'll be like, I'm sorry, it's going to make some people unhappy, but that's moving to the top of the backlog for this particular reason. So there's
Sure.
always room for those exceptions, because I think at every level of leadership, there is more context sometimes than just relying on the most, hands-on people on the team. So there's a healthy tension or balance there that I think is a good thing. And I think to the second part of your question, which I didn't get to, there's always going to be changes and shifts in our industry that change things. Obviously, AI being one a few years ago where, we were certainly tracking, but then became front and center to the way applications and software will be developed, was it didn't come at a perfect planning annual cycle. And so you know,
What?
we had to change direction. And I had to personally start spending much more of my time outbound in the startup and venture ecosystem, just trying to learn and build connections and relationships of what's happening, with this next sort of shift in our overall technology ecosystem. So we always have to keep an eye on things and react to it as well. We can't be too fixed or rigid.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a super specific question. What happens when you have a huge customer deal that comes
Yeah.
mid-cycle after the big rocks have already determined that require priorities to be shifted? How is that navigated?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of systems and tools we've built in general to drive scale of input from the field organizations into product. That makes sure that we're not relying on personal relationships between our pre-sales engineering leadership and a PM and all of that. It just we're too big for that. So there's a system for just a repetitive way for the field to bring up sort of their highest priority items. Now you can't make everyone happy all the time, but at least we feel like we have a consolidated system and view of that that's on a kind of quarterly basis. But to your point, there are always specific customer sort of escalations that come up, and we react to it via escalation. It'll come to one of the VPs, and we'll talk about, okay, we may need to swarm some engineering resources to fix a particular issue. And what I've found is it's not very often that it's a huge shift in prioritization. It does happen. It's more often that we need to pull some of the best technical minds in the company to help solve and work on a problem. And that then does impact, potentially execution on the roadmap. But, it's a judgment call at the end of the day between leaders. And so, we'll make that decision collectively through, wherever the challenge is coming from in the field, the leaders there and the product leaders and engineering leaders involved. And, it's natural part of business. It's going to happen. So, we just try to use our judgment as leaders to know when to make an exception and when we'd have to change direction from a set plan. That's what our job is as leaders, is to navigate the unexpected in that ambiguity.
Yeah, wonderful. I really like the way you've set up your system. I think it's brilliant. I would
Always a
love
work in progress. So yeah.
always a work in progress. Yes. Um, Innovation, and you mentioned, AI happened cycle, and we innovation's a constant, right? Innovations constantly happening around us, and we always have to make calls. Which ones are we going to dive into? Which ones we don't? AI was a disruptor. Let's just call it out. Um, w- I've been hearing a lot of pressure, and would love your reaction to this statement that the rate of innovation and the pace of innovation is escalating. Are you seeing that? And if you are, like, how do you plan for innovation? How do you when you have this rapid um, opportunity that comes up every once in a while, like how do you leverage it and manage your organization around it?
Yeah, I think one, I think staying close to what's happening in the environment, and when AI is an example of a clear disruption in a positive way from our perspective in the industry, it required senior leadership from our CEOs and frankly even our board down saying, "Hey, this is going to change the way the industry looks. Do we want to be on the right side of this disruption, or do we want to be on the wrong side of the disruption? And how does it affect our strategy?" And that only can come really from the top. And by setting that context, clearing the space to get the right resources, the smartest people in the room on that problem space. And that, I think that's really what happened, in our organization is we saw that, we had a bunch of discussions at the most senior levels of the organization. We said this is a real opportunity for us. So we got to pull forward some product plans we already had. We had to start new initiatives and really make sure that everyone understood that this wasn't just something that is happening outside the company, but would fundamentally affect our potential of it as an organization over the coming decade. And so, that was obviously roughly 2 years ago or whatever now. But I think the organization then follows that cue. And then if you have bright people and you give them the space to innovate, they're coming up with the better ideas than, it's coming from the top of the organization. It's facilitating and setting the importance of it. I think with AI in particular, we also said it's not like there's going to be one AI team. This needs to be cross-cutting in every aspect of the way we do business, to how we actually build products, to how we serve customers. And so, really making sure it was everyone's focus in some way to varying levels was an important aspect, whether it's in the products we ship or the way we operate and work as a company, both sides of that sort of equation. And we also have other mechanisms. We do hackathons and, all of that to continue to build more grassroots technology, technical innovation. We spend a lot of time in the startup ecosystem, either investing in early stage companies that we think could be great partners of ours or people to collaborate with. We obviously, it's a larger company, spend a fair amount of time thinking about corporate development and inorganic opportunities. And all of those ultimately give us a lot of signal about where the market is heading. And that is all secondary, frankly, to the 54,000 customers we have, and just making sure that all the product managers and the field is bringing back what they're seeing. And, I think the market, we're lucky to be in a non-winner take all kind of a market. It's one of the largest markets in software, operational databases. Yes, we think about competition like any company, but that's not the defining piece of our success. It's how we serve customers, keep up with these mega trends, and really find a strong value add for customers in the shifts that they're trying to navigate and make sure that we execute well. That's way more the determinant of our growth success than sort of some winner take all type dynamic in our market.
Yeah, well, that makes a ton of sense. I love the in particular, the nimble approach, the flexible approach, and you know some companies, say, "It's technology, it's not ready, let's wait and see." Clearly not how MongoDB sees things. React to the statement, if you will, the rate and the pace of innovation is
Yeah.
increasing exponentially.
I think the rate and pace and innovation is definitely very top of mind for every organization. And you are seeing just amazing things just happening in the AI ecosystem, whether it be, obviously we all track all the model announcements and all that, but of every layer of the stack, some of the, innovation that's happening is, I think the fundamental nature of software is going to change because of, in particular generative AI. Software moves from being a very specific task oriented deterministic system to something that can really be a dynamic sort of assistant for, for people and solve much more complex problems. And we're seeing that kind of at every layer. You're seeing the way we interact with software is already changing from, websites and mobile apps to natural language to, you know, uh, to video and audio and more, I think, blending between the physical world and the virtual world. You look at what's happening with robotics. There's a great article I read from an AI founder the other day around ambient agents that'll just be able to see what's happening in the world around us and react. And so I think the very nature of the problems and use cases software can go after is expanded massively.
Mm.
And I think that the modality of how human computer interaction is going to work is already starting to change and will only evolve more over time. So I think in many ways, that's one of the most innovative things I've ever seen in my whole career. In the early part of my career, it was cloud mobile architecture kind of changing everything. And this is clearly bigger and broader as a potential long-term impact on productivity and software. And I do think more software will ever be created than before because just how easy it is to now democratize the ability to create amazing software experiences. And that's what we're focused on with the database and the data layer specifically. Now, the timing of these things is very hard to predict, and a lot of what we're seeing, which isn't rare, is the early stage companies are moving fast. They're innovating. They're building new experiences that just are the new apps that we haven't even been able to conceive before. And even there, I still think it's early, but they've got that fast mover advantage. I think every enterprise sees that AI is going to fundamentally affect their business, either in the way they drive efficiency in their organization, and their shareholders are watching if they're adding that efficiency, or in terms of just disrupting and changing the customer experience and how they serve customers. I think that's very well recognized. There's a lot of urgency at the top of the organization. It's being top down driven. But yet, there's still a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety around understanding how to apply this new fundamental technology to their business in the ways that are most high ROI, but also safe and trusted because, the very nature of AI applications today is that they're probabilistic and, there's ambiguity. And so, senior business leaders in the enterprise care about brand and trust. And so how do you bridge that gap? That's very much top of mind. And so we do see it's still pretty early, I would say, in the larger organizations, the broader global enterprise markets, where a lot of the dollars are in the world economy. I think it's gonna be a long game there. I don't see it happening kind of overnight, where every organization is sort of AI driven. They're still trying to navigate that shift.
Yeah, I think you answered kind of my double click on this because, I was reading the other day an in-depth article that was talking about specifically AI and our ability to actually develop AI and incorporate AI is moving much quicker than users slash corporations' ability to digest it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And over time, I think that skill set and ability will continue to drive. How many times have we seen amazing new novel technologies start in, the Bay Area, and then it sort of like shifts across the enterprise and across the world over time? And I don't want to make it about geography specifically, but just
Yeah.
conceptually, I think we're seeing the same thing. Early stage companies, having the ability to move fast, have a higher tolerance for risk and all of that because they don't really have a brand or a business necessary to protect yet. And then the skill set and the best practices and all of that get applied domain after domain, vertical after vertical, and move from those early innovators to the majority customers over a span of, I think, which will probably take a decade or two, probably not overnight.
Yeah, I love your thinking on this. How does the role in this environment, the role of product management in particular, is really changing and changing pretty rapidly? Like, how do you, as a leader, stay on top of that, make choices on what you're going to adopt, what you're not going to adopt, and kind of keep your team fresh in terms of latest process, latest best practice, latest tools?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides to this, and the way I think through this. One, the processes and tools need to evolve as a function of just scaling an organization generally. And so we've had to revamp our processes, change them, and we view process and the way we work as malleable as any product roadmap. And we iterate and we try things and is it ever perfect? No. But we're constantly kind of thinking through that just from a philosophical perspective. That's how we think about it as a leadership team. Now, I think the craft of product management in terms of the technology and tooling available and how it can change product management is amazing these days. I mean, I think looking at what you can do with things like the deep research models, I mean, I use that for any sort of qualitative research right now as a first starting point that probably saves the organization hours and hours of work from having to do that research and condense it and write it up and put it in a clear memo for me to be able, before they're comfortable bringing it to me. Now I just get in 15 minutes a good enough start to that thinking that we can start driving discussion on, just as an example. There was examples already when people are playing around with, instead of writing a long product requirements document or a set of user stories for what needs to be implemented, now you can go to some of these novel new AI tools and just build a prototype with a couple prompts that, in the meeting, right? And think about what that agility that creates in terms of expressing what the requirement even is for the engineering team to then take on and then use, engineering tools to obviously drive innovation. Same thing in design. We're seeing a lot of work happening and automating away a lot of the rote aspects of design so we can unleash more of the design organization's creativity. And, some of the work that Figma and others are doing in this space is definitely stuff we've looked at. And, this year, we've made it a goal for every part of the organization to pilot multiple areas where AI can help drive better productivity in the organization. And we tend to have an experimentation oriented culture. So we don't try to like boil the ocean. We find a pilot team, we define how we measure, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, the impact and extrapolate the ROI from there.
I love that mindset. Y- I heard the other day somebody say that the lines are starting to blur between product management and development and product management and design due
Yes.
to these new capabilities. React to that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I'm not entirely sure I could predict how the functional organizations will look as this sort of capability advances, because I could see it as, a great engineer can now start to prototype and iterate on product. I could see it as a great designer can now start to drive product requirements. I could see it as a product manager kind of dipping into both those domains more. So I don't want to try to predict like how functional orgs will evolve over time, but when I think of the work of software development and shipping product, it's very clear that these tools are a huge leverage point for any one of these functions to. And I think I was listening to and talking to one of my colleagues the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, it's not that AI is going to replace jobs; it's the people that know how to use AI that are going to replace people who don't know how to use AI in jobs." And that's very much how I feel about it. It's like I think that Jevons paradox and everything everyone's writing about right now is true. I think that there is going to be more productivity and more opportunity for amazing people to do good work. But I think the ones who are going to succeed are the ones that leverage these tools and see it as a superpower to doing work in a much more productive way.
Yeah, I love that. I want to shift gears again and talk a little bit. I noticed recently, in the last few years anyway, that MongoDB has taken a pretty big leap and really embraced product-led growth. And in my observation, any company that doesn't start there but changes midstream, that could be a really complicated and almost political shift. I would love for you to share that journey on how you guys made that decision, how you navigated your peers through that decision, and how is it going?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when the root of why we started looking at this is, in many ways, MongoDB as an open source company, in a way, has always been a product led growth company because we viewed the open source distribution as a freemium approach to driving adoption. That then our marketing team would cultivate into leads, and then our sales team would then go monetize into paying customers. That was sort of and that's fundamentally still how our enterprise software side of our business, which is about roughly 30% of our business, tends to work. When I joined and we didn't have the cloud service, we were still yet to launch it. It was really our monetization was centered around large enterprise. So even though our freemium or free version of MongoDB was used by organizations of all sizes and scales and all geographies, the monetization was really concentrated in the enterprise. And there was almost a separation between the user, which is a development team, which is very much an organic bottoms up technology selection process. I like to say the days where a CIO says thou must use XYZ technology for everything are gone. Like there's just a democratization of that selection process in a way that 20 years ago wasn't the case. So we know we needed this bottoms up sort of motion, even if the monetization was to enterprises. But in the enterprises, it's not the development team that was buying the product because the product's free for developers. It was the operations team. So there was almost this like separation between buyer and user in some ways between our commercial and free products. But with a cloud service, that whole dynamic changes because now the buyer and the user tend to align because it's the development team that now wants to use a consumption-based cloud service. They don't have to manage anything at all. And their executive teams or engineering leaders, the line of business executives who build these business applications, want their team's time spent moving fast and shipping features and capabilities and differentiation, not on operating databases. And so it drove this alignment opportunity. It also allowed us to reach and monetize the entirety of the value we were shipping to the market with open source, because now smaller companies could get started in a self-service way on a credit card for a free or a very low entry price and just scale up as their usage and sophistication goes up. So that was kind of the context behind things. So when we started launching the cloud service as a real opportunity, one of the first things we did was look at the distribution strategy. And we're like, okay, well, self-service is a new muscle for the company. That's way more B2C than it is B2B in the way we need to go to market. And so we, changed org structures, hired in people, and created sort of a cross-functional growth team that had a P&L for that, sort of self-service model where we, think about how we grow our funnel and our audience, convert and measure and A/B test, and then run a bunch of analytics on that constantly to keep improving the scale and the efficacy of bringing new users into that funnel, free and paid. That was a new muscle for the company. We had to learn how to do that and really build that from scratch. Then we looked at sort of the mid-market, earlier stage tech companies, so kind of the inside sales organization, and we said, okay, they're not really able to take a large enterprise software product and bring it to that segment of the market. The needs are different. The pockets are less deep in terms of appetite to spend there in some cases. And so we said, they're going to be more cloud first too. So that was in the early years, almost a test lab for how to think about shifting from a subscription software license to a consumption based and credit based kind of cloud model. So in the early years, there was a lot of experimentation and iteration where we were tuning the billing model and the compensation plans and the incentives almost on a quarterly basis just to get that learning going. And then there was the large enterprise. And at that time, 9 years ago, we felt large enterprise was already starting to consume data services in the cloud, but yet it was really early and there was no proven third party that had done it. The really cloud databases from AWS or GCP, it's Azure, et cetera, were getting some early traction. But there was no Snowflake, there was no Datadog, there was no MongoDB Atlas. Like that was a crazy idea. So we were a little bit more conservative on how fast we wanted to have that channel start selling the cloud service, even though as a strategy, we knew that would be over the long term really valuable. So that's how we kind of thought through things. And, we just spent a lot of intentionality in each one of those channels. One of the biggest parts to figure out was the incentive structure to have sales view the self-service funnel and monetization route as an additive thing versus a competitive thing. And that has a lot to do with showing them how now they can upsell in a healthy way and not cannibalize that business. And so I spent a lot of my time thinking and working with the team on that. And then it's also just a very new muscle to sell a cloud service versus on-premises, subscription software. So myself, a couple of folks on my team, we're basically in deals for those first couple of years as part of the sales team, learning, on one hand, learning what's working and what's not and bringing that back to messaging or product, but also just helping sell and get those deals over the line and build the trust and the confidence of the sales organization. But as I zoom out and, the philosophy we had, the way we think about it today, it's not an either or between, big enterprise solution selling on one end of the spectrum, just to keep it simple, and product-led growth on the other. We view those things as very cohesive and very important to serve different customers globally with reach and to serve them at different parts of their journey, because large enterprises aren't going to buy a database for millions and millions of dollars for a critical use case on a credit card. So you need very sophisticated enterprise solution selling in many of those organizations. And at the same time, an early stage startup that just wants to get started, doesn't want to talk to anyone. They just want to get going on a free tier, use some free credits at the startup program and scale from there over time. And when the time's ready, they might be willing to drive a commitment and we may want a CS relationship or a sales relationship. But it never starts with this, enterprise versus PLG. That's never the thinking. It's always about the economics of the system. How do we serve customers based on how they buy and where they are on that user journey?
Yeah. What a journey you've been through. Do you think, going full circle to how we began the conversation, do you think the fact that you spent a good chunk of your early career in customer-facing roles played a part in your ability to weave this change?
Uh, I think it did because I was very comfortable in the culture and know the mechanics of how a enterprise sales organization and a pre-sales organization and what it's like to run a proof of concept and what a sales process that's well run and qualification process looks like. Well, so that was certainly an advantage of just building confidence with the sales team in the early years, just because I could speak their language and I would roll up the sleeves and be in the deals and help them. And, I remember when our old MongoDB New York office, we were much smaller then. At the end of the day at 5 o'clock, I'd do the rounds and I'd stop by the finance team and analytics team, see what the numbers look like. Then I'd swing by the sales team's area. This was back when, we're much more in office day to day. And I'd like inspect the pipeline and say, what do you need for this deal? And so like, it was very organic back then. But I do think that was an advantage. But I don't want that to be misconstrued because we have product managers that came from a pure engineering background at MongoDB that are some of our most sophisticated and savvy outbound, PMs in terms of their ability to communicate, work with sales and customers. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. It's more about cultivating and growing people to have that skill set and knowing what anchor point they're starting from. It just so happens that mine started from a field perspective. And so those aspects were more natural to me.
Yeah, and whether it's conscious or not, I guarantee you culturally within your org, you probably lean on that maybe even a lot more than you think you do, because I can just tell it's just really embedded, which is honestly a really great thing for anybody listening to think about, because having that mix of experiences really round out you as a leader, and I think it really has shaped you, in very interesting ways.
Thanks.
Um, yeah, of course. Unfortunately, we are almost at the end. I could just chit chat with you forever. I've learned so much even in the short amount of time that we've talked. So thank you for all the sharing. We are at the really fun portion, which is kind of the quick question answer portion.
Yeah.
And are you ready? Are you ready to dive in?
Let's give it a shot. I'll see if I'm
Okay.
ready once we get going.
All right. What makes a great product leader?
I think we come across I think we covered the themes. I do think like adaptability and resilience is sort of a foundation of how to, succeed is sort of at a meta level or values level is really important. I think the idea of viewing as the role as we were joking earlier, a 360-degree kind of outlook and taking that sort of mindset and working through influence across all those functions. And I think embedded in that is also, I think you have to get energy from context switching, and this is not a right or wrong thing. There are
Yeah.
very, personalities and people who really love being very deep in one domain, having long running problems and spending time, thinking about that. I think it's hard to be a well-rounded 360-degree product manager if you don't thrive in an environment where 1 hour you're talking to a customer, the next it's a finance team, the next it's an engineering conversation, the next it's a strategy conversation. All of that is mixed together in a single day or a single week. You have to find energy from that. So I think
Yeah.
those things are kind of critical to being, I think, successful as a product leader.
I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but you definitely said grit. Grit has to be in there
Yeah.
somewhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's the
Yeah.
resilience aspect is
The
critical.
resilience, that's just
Yeah.
another word for it. Fair
Yeah.
enough. All right, what's your favorite tool right now and why?
As a per personal user, this is not at all novel, but, I think Perplexity is fantastic. It's, an amazing just tool for just my day-to-day searches and questions I have, all of that. There's a new app that a few weeks ago somebody tipped me off of called it's a podcasting app called Snipped, SNIPD, and I've been learning how to use that. I'm a huge podcast listener constantly, and so that's made it into my rotation. And then I think the third one is really some of these deep research models for like more ambiguous or more qualitative type questions that where I need to just sort of bounce ideas or get a starting point for a discussion. And those are probably the three tools that are very much in use in my rotation today.
On the deep research models, are
Mhm.
there any in particular that you lean towards?
Um, it's I think they all are pretty solid. I personally think the best one today is the $200, so a little pricey, OpenAI deep research model. I think that's the one find myself gravitating towards, but there's utility in the various others as well. And these things are leapfrogging and changing almost every other week. So by the
Yeah, no
time
kidding.
anyone sees this, it might even be a different answer.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay. What are you reading right now?
So it's I am reading a very long, and I just started it, biography of Winston Churchill, which was informed by a long conversation about geopolitics and the state of the world with one of my peers, and we got into a really amazing conversation, which led me to kind of go. And he recommended it, and so I just started it on this trip.
Oh, wow. Well, you'll have to let us know how that goes.
Well,
I
it's
have
about
to
1,000
imagine.
pages, so it may take a while before I let anyone know about it.
Good bedtime reading.
Yeah.
Who do you follow and why?
Yeah, I listen to and track a lot of media and all of that. I think if I had to pick one that I most recently really does just continue to just be top of mind as an analyst is Ben Thompson. So I listen or read everything he writes in stratechery, or whether he does geopolitically with Sharp China or Sharp Tech, where as more of a podcast format for some of the same topics. I feel like I always learn something there. That's definitely top of mind right now.
Awesome. Listen, Sahira, this has been a wealth of information. I want to just thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and all of your learnings in your journey. And again, congratulations on being one of the top CPOs. I think anybody listening now understands why.
Thanks, Renee. I really appreciate it. I had fun in the conversation and look forward to continuing the conversation.
This is SC Moadi again, founder and chair of Products That Count. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, be sure to leave us a review on your favorite platform, including Spotify and Apple. And please check out our other resources at productsthatcount.org. They're designed to accelerate your product career and make product the most important function in business. Until soon.